Okay, and Charlie, it's
Allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
on here for selection of a vice chair. I don't know if you want to have a vice chair, it's kind of late in the game, but it's up to whatever. Actually, you can't add things to the agenda to this special meeting, so it's on here if you want to have. Up to you. You want to volunteer? All in favor? So nominated and then all in favor, yes.
Who was nominated as vice chair?
Julie Erickson.
Okay. Can't hear.
I can't hear a thing.
Can't hear, guys.
I was not here on June 2nd, so I would appreciate someone making a motion to approve the minutes.
I came in late. I was on Zoom before that, but I'll make a motion.
Somebody else can do it.
Need a second? All in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye. And you're abstaining.
We're ready to discuss.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just have a question. I got a phone call today, and I think this is for Attorney D'Onofrio. Obviously, the Board of Ed and the partisan nature of it is starting to raise people's concern and talking about it. It was brought to my attention that because Sal Bordenero is the one that initiated the conversation on it, and there was a quote taken, I know it didn't really matter. But folks are saying that if this moves forward, that they're going to challenge it in court and try to get the whole process going up, because Sal should have never been the chair or proposed the idea. I just want to put it on everybody's radar. I don't know what the reaction is, but what the person told me today that they plan on challenging any action on the Board of Ed in court because of how it was moved by somebody who shouldn't have been on the committee. So I just, in all fairness, I want to give everybody the heads up and at least let them know. I don't know if we can do anything to fix it, but at least be on the record.
I will mention that, had he not raised it, it was on my radar already. Being new to the community, it was difficult to figure out who the candidates were for Board of Education. I looked all over town for information, and I just feel that this is a good move for the community. So I would have raised it before myself, not necessarily now.
So, Attorney D'Onofrio, I don't know if there's anything to talk about, but I just wanted to be forthcoming and let you know I got that call.
Well, I appreciate you letting us know that. You know, there has not been a draft report that has been submitted to a public hearing or to the town council as a recommended report. So if somebody wants to challenge that draft report or the submission of the recommended charter to the town council, they're going to have to do it on some other basis. Because as I look at the five of you, I don't see Mr. Bordenero there.
Neither do I.
And it's the five of you that are going to need to vote on that draft report and that final recommended report that goes to the council.
Would it help at all to reintroduce subject and have a vote on that?
Listen, right now, all you have is a working draft. There's nothing to revisit. You haven't made a vote on anything yet. That's what you have. You guys at the first meeting tasked me with being the keeper of the draft. And so what I've done is I've listened to the discussions. I've had a meeting with the town manager, the town clerk, and the town finance director about what they'd like to see. And I've provided you with updated red line drafts for you to discuss at your meetings. But right now, you can talk about any of that. You can talk about anything new. You can talk about anything you want with respect to that document, something that's not in the document, something that you want to change in the document. It's all in front of you. Nothing's been decided. It's all in front of you to discuss, and then whatever you tell us to generate as that final draft that you want to have that public hearing on next week, that's what we'll generate. We're here to serve the commission and be a resource for the commission. But I just want to be clear that nothing has been voted on by way of a draft report to go to a public hearing or as a recommended final charter revision to go to the town council. Those two tasks are your big tasks that you have yet to perform.
Thank you.
And if it's helpful, your outside counsel agrees with your corporation counsel on that perspective.
Thank you.
You want to go through the red line?
May I ask a question? I might have missed it. This is Steve Mednick speaking. I have not met the new member and I missed the roll call, so I don't even know the new member's name. So I'd love to meet him and like to find out what the new member's name is.
My name is Charles Nessa. I'm a member of the town council.
Great.
I've been-
Nice to meet you, sir.
With my ignorance on this subject so far, is it more helpful to go page by page over everything? Or do you want to start with each subject one at a time? Is there a preference?
Possibly, it might help to go through it, find the ones that might require more discussion. If we have these plans on Monday on that, we can try to finalize something so we can narrow it down to what is left, if that is.
Yeah, I would agree as well. It's a pretty large document.
We'll lead us through it then.
Sure. So the first item that, again, this is the existing charter and the red lines reflect the working discussion of potential edits. So, now's the time if anybody has a question about anything else. I'm not in charge of this process. I'm not going to say, oh, we start with 2-8, so you're stuck with 1-1 through 2-7 the way you want it. If there's something prior to these redlined edits, then, the purpose of this exercise as we do a page turn is for the commission to speak up and say, hey, I know this isn't in the existing redline draft, but I want to talk about it. Okay, so with that backdrop, the very first proposed edit is in section 2-8, the Board of Education. And as we talked about when we did this on Monday, the consensus from the discussion that took place prior to Monday's meeting that resulted in me making this edit was to show a Board of Education that is elected in consistent with the applicable Connecticut general statute rather than as what's been referred to as the nonpartisan method. So what I did there was delete the existing text with respect to the language about no party designation and nominations be made by petition and replace it with the simple statute that says the method of nomination, voting, and election to office shall be as provided in 9204B of the general statutes. So that's what's there for your consideration on this hot topic.
And Mr. Chair, through you, Attorney D'Onofrio, I'm going to ask the question of you, I think, because you just said consensus. So if Julie and I wanted to get rid of the Board of Finance, at what time would we propose that to hold a vote? So that way, at least our voices will be heard on that particular issue. I know it's workshop now and you're kind of operating off consensus. Is that something we'd have to prepare on our own, or is that something you would do?
No, the consensus means that at least a simple majority, 3 of the 5 people, would like to see a draft charter with a revision to a particular section. And then once you tell me, yeah, that's the consensus, we want to see it, then we'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and make that edit for you.
No, I understand that, but the reality is if the 3 other members feel strongly that the Board of Finance should continue, we're never going to reach consensus. And Julie and I, other than just for discussion purposes, really have no opportunity to express our opinion on it.
He can
Well,
make
you
a
certainly can express your opinion.
And can he make a motion?
You can make a motion.
Sure.
Okay, so we'd make a motion at the time when we're voting on the other ones that were quote consensus items, I think was my question.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to, if you want to make a motion to have it be part of the draft report, that's the proper way to do it. Sure.
Okay, all right, I appreciate that, thank you.
Sure.
No, I think we're all still discussing, and we'll do it later. I mean, I don't want to lock everybody up with votes.
Yeah, let's get comments on the Board of Ed issue right now. And as we move through, when we get to that section, we'll listen to your concern.
Sure.
I think I've stated previously that I'm not in support of the partisan board that I made that comment at last Thursday's meeting. But I've been thinking a little bit about having this in the charter, even beyond what I feel. My concern is that, as I recall, in the 2016 charter revision, when the Board of Ed, again, was a recommendation from the commission to make it a partisan Board of Ed, that became the focal point of everything to do with the charter revision. And when it came time for voters to vote, as you realize, not everything was approved because there was concern about approving some of the language kinds of things that that commission had recommended because people were afraid. They voted no for the Board of Ed being partisan, and then they were afraid that some of these other things.
Do you think the
So
Board of Ed
I-
issue overshadowed it?
Yes, so my concern is, again, hearing the charge from the town council in regards to the 3 major issues that they asked us to address. Those are at risk. I feel they're at risk because, as Joe's indicated, I'm hearing from a lot of people, it's starting. They're not happy with the Board of Ed. And I agree, granted, there's probably people on the other side as well. It's just that I'm hearing that. So my concern is, it was a big fervor. I remember that.
Your concern is well taken, but on the other side, I'm getting a lot of phone calls. We need to know who we're voting for. People are very confused what their candidates represent. And I gotta be honest, I'm not happy with the last part of the revision. I don't like the town committees picking our town council. It's got rid of the election for the town council. And I don't want that to happen to the Board of Ed. But being reassured by this information, that anybody can petition to run for it and to get on the ballot. I would encourage people to do that for any election.
I think our team separate questions out and your primary questions and then group minor changes with the help of the attorneys on which ones are applicable to group as minor changes. And maybe that would help.
As I recall, those are the ones that did not pass last time, that we're dealing with now because they did not pass because the Board of Ed.
Yeah, one question got too complicated.
Right.
You understand.
So, I mean, honestly, I worry because, will me and Eddie potentially not make it? Will the town manager. I mean, you don't know how people are gonna vote, but,
The other problem here, people calling me since they've heard that, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but they think the VNA is going to get canceled. And that's not the object. It's to turn it into an ordinance control entity so it can be fixed. Here again, I don't know how to convey it to the vote.
they're hot topic issues. Both of those are very hot topic. And, you know, part of me wonders, do you concentrate on one? And I don't know. I think you run a risk. That's all. I'm just, again, regardless of partisan or non-partisan, you run a risk when you start touching.
I don't recall the wording personally. I know that a lot of people said there's a lot of confusion on it. The word, I think partisan, they said they were scared or whatever, they weren't sure. So I think really got to be like clarify it, simplify it as to like it's a party affiliated, you know, what party they're affiliated in. Because
That's what people, partisan, it brings them.
people didn't know what they were voting for. So they chose not to, as opposed to, and then they complained at the polls this last election that they didn't know who the heck they were voting for. And a couple of people actually voted for more people from the opposite party that they wanted than they did because of not being affiliated. And to me, that's a huge, regardless which way it goes,
Right.
that's not our goal.
Yeah, I agree.
It's people's choice. If they don't know what their choice, I mean, you can say what you want about them, you know, researching, but
So I've been here for 25 years and I've been at the polls many times over those 25 years. And I've also heard it about town council members, even though they do run on a party ticket. You know, honestly, sometimes people don't educate themselves. And I know that's not our job. That's not our job to educate our voters, you know.
But our job is to present this in a way you can understand. Really make it clear what we're asking. And clarifying the language.
I still don't support it. I'm hearing what you're saying.
And it hasn't been decided yet. Whatever item we pick, we all need to work together and make it really clear. 2-8, clerk pointed out that we would be better off making them either terms to coincide with election.
2 years or 4 years to go along with. There has to be an introduction in how the town council, the present members roll off. And that's all it. But to have it as a 3-year term will just cause major confusion.
So my question has to do with other boards and commissions that are elected. And the police commission, as an example, what is their term? It's like 4 years? I just personally, from being on the board of ed for 9 years, 2 years is such a short period of time, honestly. I even worry about it with town council, you know.
Well,
that was
the other
something
thing
new.
is that the way they're staggered, so was to keep continuity, so you wouldn't have a whole new board at any point in time. And I think you wouldn't want to sit down with all new members.
And I think that's to Julie's point, you're gonna have people that are just getting their legs underneath
Yeah.
them for 2 years, and then the whole potentially maybe a 4-year term would address that at least. in part.
Yeah, I'm looking on this. Page 15. Doesn't-
So I think it was recommended, or maybe a thought was, you know, to pick a particular year when the old system rolled off and the new system rolled on. I don't know if there's a good legal way to handle that transition, or maybe an old process to a new process.
Yeah, you can sunset it so that the folks that have been elected using the existing methods serve out their terms, and you stagger in the terms of the new folks.
So, thank you, Kate pointed out, in section 2.5 for the Board of Police Commissioners, it's serve a term of 4 years until I'm thereafter.
So what happens is, depends on the time, whether it's 2 or 3.
The Board of Assessment Appeals is 4 years.
Yeah, so it's 2 or 3. So for the Board of Police Commission and the assessment appeal, the entire board is not turned over at the same time.
Right.
So it's, 2 of them are up one municipal election, and then 3 of them are up the next municipal election for.
So it's still a 4-year term.
It's a 4-year term, yes.
Right.
But it varies as far as, and that's fine if that's what you decide on. It's just the 3-year doesn't.
Right, I hear what you're saying. It's out of-
Yeah.
One of the attorneys to clarify something for me, if we did decide to make it a partisan board of ed, for lack of a better name, will we be required to have the balance of party members like the other board commissions
Yes, minority representation rules apply.
would apply?
Yep.
Then we get back into the town committee, picking the candidate. I'd rather see people running their own, than other people choose.
Well, the interesting thing that was happening with this Board of Ed too is you have 3 members that are up every year. So for the introduction, I don't know how you determine party affiliation because you have members who are serving and that whole bit. So those are things that we would have to allow Attorney Donafield to figure out.
Well, you would transition in, you would, as you're creating the partisan classes, you would have minority party representation for each of the classes and an overall number for the entire body once the entire body is seated as a partisan body. So it'll be a tricky, not a difficult, but a well-formulated transition would make that happen pretty easily.
Minority representation, could it be, it was 2 for the minority party, or would it have to be 1/3?
I'm sorry?
Is there a required balance of minority representation?
So in our charter, we are very strict in our minority representation, where it's usually a simple majority. That's how we've been doing it outside of some of the other things. So, but normally you would follow statutes. And it would be for 9 members, you would have 3 members who are Republicans, and 6 who are Democrats, or the vice versa, or however you do it.
So at least 3 from the minority party.
At least.
Yeah, if you have a simple majority standard, that's a stricter standard than the state.
Well, are we at a point where our attorney can make a recommendation for wording and we can look at that on Monday, or do we want to do more discussion on that for the transition?
Or is that the council? Or is that us?
As far as the language,
Yeah.
the language is,
Even with the transition.
yeah.
Nice to do it. It's too much work to do.
I heard attorney saying that.
Sort out.
And so, as you were saying, the statute doesn't connect.
Is that what you, I mean, you have to tell, Attorney Donafield what you're looking for.
I would appreciate a sample of wording for a partisan board of ed and the 4-year term. I think 4 years. I agree with Julie, 3 years is kind of short of the argument. And somehow to stagger the term.
So 4-year terms staggered. Is that the consensus? I see people nodding, but
Yes. Jeff?
Yes.
Okay. Steve, you want to take a crack at that?
I'll be happy. I'll do it tomorrow.
Thanks.
So if you look at the state statutes, I just found an OLR report. Essentially, if it's 9, the maximum from the same party is 6. according to state statute.
I'm not sure. I don't know if we'll get in the wording. Anything else that you'd like to have them include?
I don't know. I never knew when I was on for 9 years.
I think that times are so volatile for women.
That's why-
Well, the
That's why-
problem is you bring politics into the classroom because now people are, beholden to a town committee that nominated them, that supported them, that, and that's why I never was part of a town committee when I was on the board of ed for 9 years, because I wanted
admire
to be
that.
beholden to the children.
But we do have a way around the fountain.
Unfortunately, it
Like,
takes
it's
some
only
money,
about
it takes some money to run an election.
It's only about 100.
No, yes, I'm aware of the petition process. I'm talking about the money to run an election. And you are not being supported by a town committee. Now we're basically on your own to campaign, which you are anyways, regardless. We are,
now.
yes, but
But I
it's,
don't think they would be under this scenario. I think town committees are going to be forced to take an interest in the board of ed
absolutely.
to preserve.
On the last election cycle, one council chairwoman came out in favor of certain candidates. I have no problem with it, but really, it made it partisan. So it's going there anyway.
And I think when the voters go out and vote, whether they're labeled, if they're labeled Republican, Democrat, the voter has a choice of whether to make it political or not political at that point. They can vote for the other party. If they're Republican, they can vote for Democrat, and in a sense, non-political then by their state.
Or independent, somebody's going to say, higher. So do you understand our charge, Mr. Attorney, what we're asking for?
4-year terms staggered.
Got it.
We'll move on.
I think the document that Charlie is up to address this, if there's any vacancies.
Shouting.
Do we
doing
need
something
to have
wrong.
anything stated on within the charter to cover vacancies?
Yeah, it's already there. We'll just-
All right. Again, it's. Yeah,
So, yeah, because right now the board of ed fills their own vacancies.
Yeah.
Interview candidates.
Where we're proposing to do.
It's got to go back to the electorate. The town by a majority voted. Oh, it's still open. Yes, it's still by the board. Okay, I just saw the electorate of the town, so I thought it
I
was.
imagine some
Yeah.
boxes like the town council.
Yeah.
So Attorney Canafio is gonna follow what you sent out, right, for the Board of Ed, is that your plan? Okay.
Say that again?
So Charlie sent out the comments and questions this morning, and I emailed it to everybody, I think this afternoon. So he's looking to do something similar to what he sent out this afternoon.
with the exception of the 4 years, instead of the 2-year service, it's a 281 and 282.
So the consensus of the commission is that you'd like the next draft to include 281 and 282 as provided by Charlie?
And also,
Except-
Unless you see need for correction.
Except for the term should be 4 years, right?
I mean, it's still incorporating our attorney's recommendation on the writing language.
also there's a section 2-2-2 nomination of candidates, petitioning candidates. that he has on here. This is on his, now, looking to add it.
Oh,
That's why I'm bringing this out to make sure we're on the back of that page. On the back.
On the red line?
It's on, right.
That's 9.
What did I say?
Not that.
Oh.
Not
you
that.
said 2-2, okay.
Okay, sorry. I
Yeah.
apologize.
I got a little
That's why I
confused.
I'm sorry. 2-9-2. Isn't that what it says here? 2-9-2. Nomination of candidates. On his, yeah. Okay, sorry, whatever I said.
You said that?
Yeah.
So on 2-8-2, the proposed language for filling vacancies says may. If this is what you want, it should say shall, because otherwise, okay, it may be filled that way, how, because then you get into the question of under current law, if there's a Board of Ed vacancy and the local charter doesn't provide otherwise, the remaining board members appoint the individual to fill the vacancy until the next regular election. So if this is the way you want to do it, then let's just say that.
I agree with you. To have the language appropriate.
This was just my suggestion, please, you do it. By no means do I have to word the charter law.
So this language at the end of 282 that says, unless said incumbent was not an enrolled member of a major political party, you talking about unaffiliated?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the consensus is 281 with the edit to 4 years from 2 years, and 282 with the shall instead of may will get added to the draft tomorrow. Is that right? Okay.
Are there any suggestions different from that? I mean, you raised the question about not enrolled in a major political party or concerns with that wording.
Yeah, I'm gonna fix that.
Great.
Yep.
I appreciate your help with that.
Are we ready for the next one?
So, well, while we're still on this page, can we go back to the town council? Because I know Charlie did mention it, and I, as well, have a concern that really the only people that we're voting, the only person that we're voting for in the council is the mayor. Want to talk about that? Charlie has some experience, he's a town council member, Joe's had some experience on the other end of it.
I was on the council when a party could hold 5 seats.
Right.
You know, there was a real election for the town council. Since the charter was changed, each party is guaranteed 3 seats, so they only run 3 people. 1 year, Republicans ran 4, and I got 1. So a party can run as many as they want. They can only take 3 seats, even though their 4th candidate may get more votes than the opposing party's candidates. They still don't get the seat. So I don't think it's fair. I think trying to fix that right now. Every member of the commission is welcome to bring up their own points.
Accepts the fact.
Well, we're tackling the Board of Ed. Let's be real. And I've heard that is a major complaint from people. All you vote for in this town is the mayor. That's it.
I made that complaint myself.
Yeah.
But
Honestly,
being
not
said-
just me personally, but I'm only voting for the mayor, and that really bothers
Being on the council, the Board of Finance has been great help. to me. I was on the council when we did the finance work. Read through it, met with every single committee and manager and crunched all the numbers. And I am so grateful because we have smarter and more astute people doing it. And
me. Yeah, and I'm not talking about the Board of Finance right now.
But I'm just saying, the we change council issue, we're gonna wind up changing the board of finance. The way they're set up in it, it's gonna be real painful.
I mean, honestly, it's the same argument you guys were making in the Board of Ed. You know, that nobody knows, well, all you have is Democrat, Republican, you're voting for the mayor. It's in principle, it's the same.
I agree
kind of
completely. If you get the suggestion that fits it, I would like.
Let's look at the old charter. And get the language from there, and I'm not privy to that, unfortunately, so. I know that we worked under the previous arrangements that we had. Like I said, we do have a town manager form of government. You know, I understand the Board of Finance has been helpful to the town council in an advisory capacity, but it may not be necessary, so I don't know, they're kind of getting intertwined, I understand that as we're talking about it, but.
Well, it gets into
Yes.
if the budget is turned down, how it's settled, and it's in the real can of worms. We're here to listen. If you have an idea.
I don't know how to structure it because I don't recall how it was structured previously, but maybe you do.
When I was on, I think your membership got trimmed down, but when I was on, we had 9 members. We didn't have the Board of Finance. 6 of those 9 served on the budget committee. And we do all the things as the Board of Finance, recommend the budget back to the town council, and then the town council will take a vote. Town committees typically didn't run more than 6, because 6 is the most they could get. Occasionally they would, but typically it was 6 from each party, so you had 12 candidates as a whole and 9 would get on.
And when I got there, it was an action of 5, and my company 5. So we got 10 people running, 3 didn't make it.
Yeah.
Okay.
The top vote-getter.
And then the mayor was determined by.
The mayor was a ceremonial position. Yeah, well, I mean, even more so, it was actually voted on by the council at their organizational meeting.
Yeah, it was basically the chairman of council.
Yeah, and it typically, I think in the past, it was the highest vote getter. I think there was a year that Ida was the top vote getter and somebody else was gonna do it, and it was a big to do about it, and in the end, Ida ended up getting it. But it was just a function of the council of their organization meeting that typically took place like the 3rd week of November or something like that.
And that was only by, that was suggestion
Yes.
to give it to the highest vote getter. It wasn't by the charter or anything like that. It was just to give it to them.
Well, I'm interrupting you in a sense, my concern right now, we've got 6:30, our schedule is actually till 8, we've got shorter days. We've got a lot to get through to approve, to pass, to move on. It sounds in discussion that might be more than we want to handle this time around.
We only have Monday and a public hearing on Tuesday, and my understanding is when I do this, let's do it right. I also understand that, Charlie's encouraging us to speak up, and I respect that, and I appreciate that opportunity to speak up.
I think
And I've already brought up Board of Finance in previous meeting. I know you weren't here for that one, Charlie, but I think that one I was concerned as well. It's unfortunate that the time frame is so condensed. But let's do it right,
Let's try
guys.
to be led by Attorney Knoxville. We're good with the board ahead, am I correct? Everybody else fine with that level?
Yeah, I'm just not saying no, I'm saying, can we swing around to it again and get through the list that we pretty much agreed on a lot of things?
Well, I didn't agree on the board then, we just spent 20 minutes. So, I mean, in fairness,
No, the way he's been doing it is as long as 3 members said they like that idea, he's been listening to his consent. Is that correct? Attorney D'Onofrio?
Yeah, tell me how else you would like me to deem a consensus.
I don't know that there's any other way. I think by the way you've done it is the only way you use the term consensus.
Yeah, I mean, that's 32 years. That's the way I've always done it. Steve Mednick, do you have a different idea?
Whoever taught you how to use it, taught you correctly.
I think you read the room. You get a sense of the room.
Yeah.
And you don't have to take a vote necessarily, but get a sense of the room as long as.
So if I can have a sense of the room about the town council, because I need a sense from you, Joe, that we would like to discuss it further as well as you, Charlie. And I know time is of the essence, but I think we should do this right. And
I'm gonna refrain from discussing it because I don't have a good plan. If someone have a good plan, I would love to hear it.
if we could get the alternative, maybe that would help. The previous to 2016, I would assume.
Yeah, I think, and I'm fine with it, if we want to buzz through the ones, just, and then circle back, and we can put the town council and the board of finance off to the side. And then that'll give us time to make documents.
What's up?
So section 3E, is that our next? Section 3E, where it's red line.
Oh, that's the amount of money that we talked about. Yeah, that's the general statute.
So I'm okay with that with no changes.
Which one, I'm sorry, I thought, I'm
We're on
looking at
page 13.
Page 13 and 14.
What
The next
about-
red line, the next red line is 291.
Yeah, 291.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's what it was. I thought we did that.
Yeah, we just did that.
You guys talked about that already?
We're fine with that.
Okay.
So,
No.
Can I just ask a
no,
quick- I
wait a
don't know
minute,
how we
this
can
is
do
in
this.
conflict with what you
Yeah.
are proposing. So, and under what was proposed by Charlie, it says in here that if any, unless the incumbent is not an enrolled member of a major political party, in which case his successor shall not be an enrolled member of the major party. Here, it is saying under 2-9-1, if you run under a party,
Yep.
that's your affiliation.
well, not even.
Well,
The way it's written here is if the party endorses you, which we do have cross endorsements, you look at Walter Kleibowitz. Like, let's say, let's just throw, for instance, out there, and Attorney D'Onofrio is a Republican. He has a falling out with the Republican Party, but he's not switching his party because what he believes at the federal level or whatever. But he runs for the Board of Ed, the Democrats as a unaffiliated voter, or however he wants to do it. The town council endorses, or the Democrats endorse him, so he switches his party to unaffiliated to get on the Board of Ed. The Democrats endorse him. This language to me would say then he's officially a Democrat.
Right.
Is that right? Is
Yeah,
that-
that's how we do it now.
Okay.
Is it-
But it's different from what you have in your proposal.
I just worry about it in town committees
Yeah,
playing games.
to me,
And then the other people can't control who endorses. You get endorsed without asking.
Yes.
No, you have to sign a paper saying that you want to be on the ballot.
Correct. I can endorse a candidate, not even know the candidate. Town committee can endorse so and
Oh,
so.
you have to force it.
so stick with the way it is.
I think we should take it worth out. I don't know how to.
So you,
And I will tell you in Southington, because, and Donna probably knows this too. What they did was, one of the political parties, it's not political, was telling members of their party to switch to unaffiliated and then voting of all boards and commissions. So essentially they were their people, they endorsed them, but they were quote unaffiliated.
Yeah.
So they'd get around the minority representation. Well,
You're never gonna make it bulletproof.
No.
But they assign a party affiliation to someone because they were endorsed. It's like out there now, like, I mean.
That would be my
independence, they remain.
No matter who.
I agree with that.
No matter who.
It's out of their hands.
Yeah.
That's fine discussion. I think. Right.
But can we, how do we clarify that?
Registered independent.
well, 2-9-1, I didn't draft that. Somebody, I forget who, somebody sent that to me.
It was in the, it was in the language that didn't get approved at the last charter.
Yeah, right. So it was talked about at the meeting on
Sound
Monday
right.
from,
Yeah.
right. Right, so I was
Sound
asked to add that. You want it out now? So it was some, it was part of question,
Well,
it was
I think
part of
it's
question
actually
5.
unaffiliated. Unaffiliated, but yes, I always use the term.
I would think delete that.
Yeah, I don't see it, a need to it, and if the town committees are involved and it actually passes, they're gonna come up with their own people.
But
But
your point alone, we're the person being. Maybe even not want somebody's endorsement, but they'll get it.
All right, so
It's
they,
choice, yeah.
we want that removed totally?
I think a lot of this is governed by state law anyhow. New Britain, as you know, has the fusion ticket that the mayor runs. Waterbury used to have an independent party that was basically a breakout party from the Democrats. And for a while, they supplanted the Republicans as the minority party. I think it's really governed for the most part by Title IX.
Right. So you want this out, right? Yes,
sounds like
Yeah.
that.
yes,
Yes, yeah.
okay, it's out.
Go back and
Next item is in 3-8. This is increasing, we talked about this a few times now, increasing the bid threshold from 10,000 to 25,000, consistent with Connecticut general statutes. Are we good on this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, true consensus.
Next one is top of page 14, if you're on the same printing schedule I am, but it's still in 3-8. And it's adding, we talked about this Monday, adding a requirement that all town labor contracts, including Board of Ed labor contracts, be presented to the council for approval unless otherwise prohibited by law.
Is that typical elsewhere? I remember when I was on the town council, it would be presented to us, but there was no vote taken. If it was an arbitration ruling, we could reject at the council level, and then it would go back, and whatever we got back was the final deal. Is this something that exists elsewhere?
Well, when I was on the both the Board of Ed and the town council in Trumbull, it existed in Trumbull. So we always had to have every labor contract approved by the council.
Under Title VII, under MIRA, all contracts have to be approved by the legislative body or under the Board of Education collective bargaining statutes. It may not apply to lesser agreements. So your term labor contracts, I don't know if you mean collective bargaining agreements. If you do, you should be more precise.
Yeah, that's what I would change it to is
Yeah.
CBAs. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's not unless prohibited, it's required by state law that these contracts be approved. It's a very short period of time. It's really, we'll talk
30
about
days.
that another time. It's a horrible,
Right.
horrible law, but they are required, legislative bodies are required to approve.
Unlike every other labor union in the state of Connecticut, the Board of Education, the education actually has timelines set forth in statute.
Right.
Nobody else does.
So the wording is all right with that. then?
Except for, labor.
Yeah, we'll change it to CBAs. I think that's a good edit.
Collective bargaining agreements, yeah.
Okay. The next edit is in 4-2. And this has to do with the forms of the financial reports. And this is something that was requested from the finance director, that the forms for the Board of Ed monthly financial reports be, in a format that comes from him with the approval of the town manager, and that the reports be prepared for each month by the 15th day of the following month and be delivered to the director of finance.
And I think the reason that was added was to make it useful information to the Board of Finance and their work and to tie it in the costs that have been in the budget. And so I think I agree, I think that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any I mean, I do work in 15 towns. I'm not aware of any municipality where the director of finance doesn't get monthly reports from the Board of Ed.
And there's case law that requires boards of education to comply with administrative requirements of a municipality. We don't have control over their line items, but you have control over their oversight administration issues. So this is a perfectly appropriate provision.
We good with that one?
Yes.
Okay, the next one is 4-4-1. This we talked about on Monday and I think last week as well. Right now, we have a situation where we have a state statute incompatibility of town offices that prohibits anyone from serving on a board of finance if they are a salaried town employee. The existing charter prohibits anybody, not only if they're an employee, but also it prohibits them from serving in any other elective or appointive capacity. And as we talked about on Monday, there's a variety of boards, commissions, and quite frankly, building committees on which having a member of the Board of Finance would be useful. So the suggestion on this one came from me. I think this was my only suggestion, actually. And that is to prohibit Board of Finance members from serving on the Board of Ed, Town Council, and obviously as an employee of the town, but otherwise not have this broad prohibition. I think it's hard enough to get good people to serve on boards and commissions, and especially building committees, because building committees are very unique in terms of the intensity and the duration of their service. It's not unusual. If you look at the Berlin High School project that went to the PBC, they were meeting weekly for a very long time. And it's hard to get good people to serve. And like I said, when you're talking about large capital projects, for example, if the town goes forward with the community center project, it would make sense to have somebody with a financial background be able to serve. And I wouldn't want to foreclose members of the Board of Finance. There's no conflict with serving on a building committee and a Board of Finance.
I think that's good for me.
Sharing. I'm just, my thoughts are you get somebody that ends up very pro a certain project, and they're on one finance, and they get on that board for something that they personally very strong about. Then they get to chair it too. It's a little bit of, even though we all have the same vote, a little bit of ability to push there. Is there, you think not having a chair of such a board would be prudent or not bothered with something like that?
Well, I mean, the Board of Finance, we're talking about the hypothetical that I used was a building committee, but it wouldn't necessarily, if you think that there's other boards and commissions and committees that members of the Board of Finance shouldn't serve on, then you should have that discussion. This is a suggestion from me. If you don't like it and you want to reject it, you're the client. You can tell me, no, Jeff.
I very much like it.
Yeah.
I've seen projects in town that probably went through and shouldn't have gone through, and then we're ripping them back up 3 years after they're put in, and it's just, sometimes people put forth something that they're very hot on, but
The chair is selected by the commission.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is don't forget, under the charter, there's a certificate of need that comes to the council. So it's not like the PBC picks the projects. They get what the council sends them.
I'm new to a lot of this, so it was just
Sure.
thought. It was just a thought that I threw out. But
I appreciate the thoughts. I don't see that as a concern in most cases.
Honestly, I don't see anyone ever doing that. Talk about a commitment, being on Board of Finance, and being on a public building.
So I like it as written.
I think it makes sense,
Okay.
Attorney D'Onofrio, from the perspective of having that person on it. But boy, that's a commitment, right? Think about it.
well, I'm good with it the way it is, the way you suggested.
The next item is in section 5-1. This has to do with the appointment of the town manager. And this is, again, this has been in the prior versions of the draft, as have most of these edits. And this would eliminate the residency requirement to allow the town to have a larger pool of potential candidates to draw from for town manager.
Is there still a requirement that they reside in the state, or is that coming off too?
Well, that's, you guys can talk about that if you certainly can.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm kind of like the state too.
how about the county?
I know
I'd say
the
so.
last time we did a search, I was for two searches. They had to move here with a big problem. It was really limited about food.
Oh, I think we all agree with that. I think we're just saying, should we include that they have to live in the state, at least the state?
Oh, yeah, it's like that guy on TIC in the afternoons pipeline, but he didn't even come to the state. He's killing everybody, but he lives in Massachusetts. He
Oh, I
reports a
didn't know
show in
that. Oh, wow.
Massachusetts, and that always to me.
Take your money.
Yeah,
For a town manager, at least, you know, I get it. If you live in Simsbury and you were the town manager in Torrington and you're applying for Berlin, are you gonna uproot your whole family? No, I get that, but at least be in the state.
at least live in the state, right?
So you want to change that to resident of Connecticut?
Yeah, please. I mean,
That
I
makes
would, I don't
sense.
know if folks agree. It sounds
I
like.
wouldn't want somebody from New
We
York.
have a town engineer that drives in from Danbury, 10 more miles
Oh, that's okay.
to be in New York. We're a small state. We're limited outside the law. We have practicality. Nobody's gonna drive 100 miles. We're not.
But a town manager also is representative of the town and the business in the town and at least the state, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. I don't know, Joe.
I remember the original discussion about the town manager. We thought it important to be a part of the community and everything. And I get it, given everything else. At least maybe the state.
Haven't seen it.
Well,
Pay taxes in the state.
But I told that for the state.
So is the consensus that you want a town manager who lives in Connecticut?
Working it out. What's that?
I don't have an opinion that.
State.
So the consensus, regular should be from state of Connecticut.
Or
Okay.
at least reside in at the time of appointment. So we did it
Yeah.
Irish, something like
Yeah.
Alabama or something.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
We did.
Yeah, I mean, if you get some,
They can tell.
I mean, at least you can entertain people from out of state.
Mm.
as long as
yeah, I mean, if you get some superstar candidate from Milwaukee that's, you know, dreamt his whole life of being the town manager in Berlin and wants to move his family.
Right after,
You know,
right after.
I mean, look,
where's Berlin,
we-
Connecticut?
We lucked out with a Roche, but you know, we didn't get flooded with applications either.
I like, where it's, you speak out of the city of Berlin, but as, you know, they really,
Yeah.
you know, as it's during the tenure of his office,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
I think, yeah, that's okay.
Got it. The next edit, 5-3D, duties of the manager. We talked about this on Monday. This is a cleanup edit because right now it's very vague. Prepare and cause to be printed as soon as possible after the close of the fiscal year, an annual town report. We're not really sure what that means. From a statutory perspective, there's an annual financial report that's required. We cover that in another section. And so this is just a cleanup so that the town manager understands what his duties are versus this vague provision that's there.
Kate, that was the old report that used to be spiraled and the town manager would get up in
Yeah.
front and present
Yeah.
the annual report to the council, correct?
Yes. So, but it's gotten to the point where, Attorney Denafio will get into this later too, is the annual report. We used to come up with a theme every year, all the department heads would submit
Yes.
something and the whole bit. And really the only thing you have to do is with the financials under the state. So then there's also language here later that talks about the commission and board that's supposed to submit a report that's in this thing, and they don't want to do it.
Yeah. I
I'm
get you.
fighting them all the time.
I mean, the mayor could do it too, he can do it, because, you know, I think they all do it, the state of the town,
Yeah,
and the mayor can put some stuff together if they so choose.
Okay. The next one, section 5-5, this again adjusts the bid threshold from 10,000 to 25,000. I see in the questions or comments or revisions that came today from Charlie, there's proposed new language regarding the waiver of the bid requirement. Right now, it says the manager with council approval may waive the requirement for sealed bids if it's deemed to be in the best interest of the town. Looks like the proposed edit is to add this Board of Ed to this. Is that right?
They already worked that way. We need to spell it out again. Like that,
Yeah.
If we waive the bidding all the time, in the town. In the best interest of the town. Does the superintendent of schools ever think the school board have the same authority?
I mean, you know, you gotta be a little bit careful because depending on the source of the funds, you can't waive bidding. You know, if it's state or federal funds, you got to comply with the terms of the grant. So, you know, saying that the superintendent, I mean, because then you get into the issue, well, does the superintendent need board approval? Because the council can't approve the superintendent waiving a bid. Council has no jurisdiction over the board. It's got to be the Board of Ed.
I think we should leave it alone.
Yeah.
Okay. Next item is, we talked about this again, 6-9. The fire marshal was included under 6-9, which is the fire department. The fire marshal is not part of the fire department. So we broke the fire marshal out. We didn't change any of the text. We just broke it out and made it 6-10 and then made 6-10, 6-11.
Yeah.
First substantive edit there's a lot of edits to what is now 6-11, what was 6-10, the finance section, and all these come from the director of finance. The first edit is in 6-11-2, which says these divisions may be headed respectively by a town accountant, town assessor, and collector of revenue. There is no town accountant. So this is a edit to reflect the reality of the town as it currently exists. The second edit in 6-11-2, the finance director requested that the reports for the end of the fiscal year be submitted within 180 days of the end of the fiscal year, which is consistent with state law versus the 120 days that existed in the charter as is.
So it's suggested because of state law, it's suggesting the 180 days back.
Yeah, he's got 180 days by statute, and he says it helps to have that time.
Great, thank you.
Because don't forget, I mean, a big part of it is working with the outside auditor and.
So Charlie,
Jeff, would it make sense if it's consistent with state law, simply to make it consistent with state law so that if the time frame changes, you don't have a charter that's out of whack with state law?
We can say,
Or is otherwise modified by general statutes or something?
right, yeah, right now it says, and for such other periods as may be specified in this charter, we can say 180 days of the end of the fiscal year or such other.
Maybe specified by the general statutes or this charter.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, we can make that edit.
It just seemed like a big jump. I was a little concerned for 60-day change on that, not quite understanding why, I guess.
Yeah, Kevin was at the last meeting on Monday to answer all these questions, but I don't think that one came up. Arosh, do you remember that question coming up about whether anybody thought 180 was too long?
No, it just came up today with the questions.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not like there's a line outside town hall or anyone dying to read the financial statements when it's done. So a lot of the times getting confirmations and following up with all the vendors and giving time for the auditors to do their due diligence probably makes sense. You know, if it's not required and getting done by that time,
Yep.
it gives enough time for the staff to work on it.
the next edit's in 611.4. This has to do with pensions. And the finance director, right now, the manager with council approval may amend or alter the pension system. And this just adds the Board of Finance. I think this was probably an edit that was missed by the group in 2016, because once they put the Board of Finance back in, they should have included them in the pension modification process. And then there's a important edit that the finance director requested, the last sentence of 611.4, which now says the Board of Finance and the council shall include the annual actuarially determined contribution as calculated by an independent actuary in the annual general fund budget. And, you know, having that be a mandatory requirement by putting it in the charter was, I guess, requested by the outside auditors. That's what Kevin told us.
Outside auditors, as well as when we are looking at the DB plan, currently there's a committee looking at that. The council, Board of Finance, they all felt like we should not be ever in a position or a situation where we were the last couple of years, where the pension was not funded and you had to, pay it out of fund balance. So we're trying to be financially responsible and plan for these things.
Yeah, I guess the town's been doing a good job of funding the ARC, but having it be mandatory to protect the future when we don't have perhaps such austere folks in town hall, then it's probably a good idea.
It had been neglected for a number of years. And put it in the fine, so I think this is needed.
Okay, so we're good with that. The next one is 611.6B. This is a deletion of the requirement that finance or capital leases be approved in accordance with 611.6. So they'll still, anything over $25,000 still has to get approved by the Board of Finance and the town council. But, you know, the idea is not having to go through the process in 611.6 for routine leases, like a copier lease or something. So that was a request from Kevin.
Attorney D'Onofrio, just quick question with that. So I know if we were going to spend money, let's say the community center project, and the residents of the town don't like the idea, they can take it to a referendum. I know we went through it with the turf field at one point.
Yep.
Is there any ability, like, let's say we're going to lease all of our emergency vehicles? I know we kind of do the fire trucks. I don't think we do it with the police department. But if we're going to do that, would a resident be able to petition it onto a ballot with the language change, or could they before, could they not?
Well, I mean, it depends on the dollar amount.
Yeah.
You know, because if we're incurring, you know, if it's a large dollar amount, then presumably we're borrowing.
Mhm.
Right. So if it reaches the threshold under 611.6 based on the dollar amount, then yeah, they can, you know, exercise their rights to petition for a machine vote on it or a referendum.
And that would apply to leases also, or leases separate and distinct?
It would have to be, it would apply to leases, but it would be big dollars. Yeah, right.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, so if, you know, for example, we're going to lease we're going to lease an $800,000 ladder truck, and people thought that was a bad idea, then yeah, they could petition for a referendum on it.
Okay. They can petition it, but anything, any obligation over $5 million has to go up.
Right,
The obligation, if we have the money, we can spend it without. referendum.
right. It's automatic referendum. But,
Okay, thank you.
the next one is in 611.7. This is again just to reflect the reality. There's no town accountant. So the change goes from finance director or town accountant to finance director or his designee. And this has to do with paying bills. Okay. There's also a requested edit in 611.7 in the last sentence. Right now, it says, under Connecticut law, I think it's 7-348 of the general statutes, no town official is authorized to make any expenditure in excess of the amount appropriated for that item. The charter pretty much mirrors the statute. And so we've got a provision in the charter that says every payment made in violation of the provisions of the charter shall be deemed illegal, and any official authorizing or making such payment or any part thereof shall be liable. So the finance director's concern is, sure, the person that authorizes the payment should be liable, but making, so if he or somebody in his department cuts a check because the town manager approves a bill, he doesn't want to be held personally liable for that. So that was a request that we delete or making.
Yeah.
That was a good catch, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's looking at this and saying, if I'm just doing what I'm told, then I don't really want to be liable for repaying the town. 611.9, this is a language change because what was historically referred to as the CAFR, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, has now been determined to have a derogatory meaning. And so the new term in the public accounting world is Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, which I guess is ACFR. So ACFR apparently is safe, CAFR is not. So this language reflects that language change. The next proposed edit is in 7-1. This has to do with routing annual budget requests. Right now, the departments have to submit their request by the 15th of January. The town manager and the finance director have requested to move that up to December 1st. That's an operational issue. It'll enable them to spend more time vetting budget requests and use the extra time to benefit the town. The next item is in 7-6D. This came out of, I think, 2 meetings ago. There was a consensus to take a look at some language establishing a threshold for voter participation, voter turnout. And so we put a provision in here that says that the budget that's presented becomes the appropriation of the town unless at least 15% of the voters vote. And a majority of those who vote reject the budget because it's too high or too low. So that was, Charlie, for your benefit, that was a discussion that was had a couple of meetings ago. There was a feeling that, if less than 15% turn out, then the budget as presented should be adopted. So that language reflects that discussion. Is everybody?
Very sad at our budget hearing.
Is everybody still good with that?
Can I just interject? So for the ordinances, I think it's 10% of those voting the affirmative, or is it a separate issue? Is that? Just wanted to look for consistency. It's on page 14, but maybe I'm not reading it right. in the section 3-9. Towards the end.
So,
of that-
oh, you're talking about proposing an ordinance?
Right, and looking at 10% of the voters versus the 15 that we have in this provision.
Well, it's 5%. You're talking about petitioning for an ordinance, it's 5%. But it's the council that passes ordinances.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it's not, the council is a legislative body.
Yeah, I'm just looking for
Yeah.
the consistency, that's all.
Yeah, so the council, they raise ordinances of their own volition all the time. But if the public wants to propose an ordinance,
Have to get 5%.
they can get 5% of the voters.
Okay, all right, I'm just looking for the language consistency.
Yeah, I think if you were to say, 5% is pretty low turnout.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think what we're seeing around Connecticut is, I used to joke all the time that if you really want to get people to vote for the budget, then you need to have the referendum the same day as the kids are in their Halloween costumes being marched around the school.
It's true.
That seems to
We had a-
draw
We
a
had a
big
mayor
turnout.
that would only door knock on Halloween. That was the only.
So are we still good with that 15% threshold?
Yes,
Is that
yes.
still something you want to do? Okay.
If I may interrupt, maybe back on being under that same number of 7.6, there was some conversation on third versus the last Tuesday of April. And,
What would be the reason? Do you remember the reason?
well, that's why I was gonna ask if.
I don't think it's in that section.
7.6, I'm in the wrong section.
No, it's-
Yeah.
7.6 is the annual budget referendums held the last Tuesday of April.
Yeah.
Right, I think it was changed to third Tuesday in the last document highlighted.
Yeah, Kate told me that doesn't work.
Okay, that's why I was asking, is that okay to make that adjustment? So no, we're gonna go back to the original.
Yeah. Kate, remind me why it didn't work. There's some deadline you can't meet.
Okay, so the third, the problem is that right now presidential preference primaries are held every 4 years, but they are on the last Tuesday of April. So if you have a referendum, a budget referendum on the third Tuesday of the month, the tabulators or the voting machines have to be locked for 10 days, which means that we are in big trouble for the presidential preference primary.
Thank
Don't
you.
want that to happen.
Yeah, that's fine. I just noticed that it wasn't in there. I
Yeah.
just want to make sure the timing was
And we
okay.
are so lucky to have you.
Yes.
I didn't know that. I don't know those dates.
She gets a couple of grand slams each one.
So thank
Okay,
you.
That's okay. It's better to have it out. Move it along.
The next item is 7.6F. The last sentence that was added says if the council doesn't adopt the budget by the 4th Tuesday in May, the budget as submitted by the town manager is deemed adopted as a town budget. Now I see in the notes here, somebody wants to delete that.
Well, what did we do before? This is an addition, right? I wasn't quite understanding why the addition was necessary if we haven't had it before. Maybe trying to understand why we.
Was there an automatic picking clause before?
I didn't hear it, Charlie.
If the council did not approve the budget at any point, was there an automatic date when it kicked in before? We have to have a budget by statute at a certain date, correct?
Well, you got to be able to get tax bills out.
Oh, I think that was, if I may, Kevin and I spoke about this today. And there's another problem with this date. Right now, if the budget does not pass with the last Tuesday of April, then it goes to referendum the second time, the last Tuesday of May. The date does not work
Right.
because you have a vote that day and then the council is supposed to, whatever. So I think this has to be looked at also.
Well, this came from Kevin, so tell me what date you want.
I think we may have to talk about it, Jeff. I'm not sure.
Okay. I'll talk to Kevin about it.
Just one of the reasons that, the budget gets to the Board of Finance on the 1st of March. So 90 days, we should be able to work that out so that you can finalize and get ready for the new year. It's not to drag on till May and June, and it becomes very, unproductive after a certain point. So, I mean, you have all the information you need March 1st. How much time do you need afterwards to get the budget in place?
So let me ask you this, if going back to page 27, where it says that the bottom of E, as the second referendum shall be held 4 weeks following the first referendum and conducted in the same manner as set forth. Can we change that to the 3rd week following the referendum? So it would be the 3rd week of May instead of the 4th week of May. And really, I would think that would be even better also because we're going to be having the referendum the day after Memorial Day.
Okay.
How does that work? Is that
So change so in E, in 7.6E, change 4 weeks to 3 weeks for the second referendum.
yes?
And then change 4th Tuesday to 3rd Tuesday.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so it will be just for that second referendum. And
Works for
then
me.
This language on page 28 that we're talking about would work.
After it's a council meeting in between the two referendums.
I'm sorry?
Between the two referendums, we have to have a council meeting.
Yes, yes.
They have a special meeting. Yeah.
And then also if it fails, it would have to be,
But if the first one fails, then the council has a meeting in between the adjustment.
yes.
Okay.
So is it common to go back to the town manager's budget if it doesn't get passed?
Yeah.
Is that in practice for other towns then?
Yeah. Depending on the form of government, first selectman's budget, town manager's budget, whoever the charter authorized presenter of the budget is, the budget doesn't get adopted, then the budget gets adopted.
Does it ever revert back to the prior year's budget instead, or no?
The state does it that way. It gives the governor some authority to do certain withholdings and other things, but the budget as it existed previously.
Under some of the budget referenda laws, it goes back to the prior year with some adjustment, but most charters have the executive budget as the default if the legislative body fails to approve a budget.
Right. If there's nothing in the charter, it goes back to the existing budget, but then you get a new mill rate.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. The next item is 711. This was a request by the finance director to change the requirement for approval of a town meeting for non-budgeted appropriations. The request is to increase it from 25,000 to 100,000, and then the aggregate in a fiscal year from 250 to 500,000, just to reflect the reality of what things cost in the 21st century.
Jeff, if I may, are you going to handle my section if I'm not here, or do you want
Yeah.
me to?
I'll take care of it. No problem.
All right, good. I'm sorry. I was.
No worries.
Thanks.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
So I saw that there's a note in the comments that came today. What's the basis of changing dollar amounts? Again, it's just the administrative burden that, goes on Kevin when you have a $25,000 threshold to require a town meeting. I mean, it's still Board of Finance and Town Council approval required. But we're just trying from an operational standpoint to make it a little bit more efficient.
I'm in strong support. I always thought it was silly. We elect you all to make decisions and then we're micromanaging down to such a small number. We elect you guys. We trust you to make decisions.
Yeah, I wasn't against it. I was just asking about it. It seemed to take a jump, and so I just wanted to know why, the reasoning. Yeah, no problem with that. Thanks.
And then I see there's a request that the finance director present transfer details to the Board of Finance in the monthly financial review meetings. My understanding is, that, and Arosh, you'll have to correct me on this. My understanding is that the Board of Finance does on a monthly basis get some information about transfers. In other words, line item, intra-department and interdepartment line item transfers, they get that information. In terms of transfer details, I'm not sure how much detail is being sought. You know, I mean, again, it's very important. We've got very specific requirements as to the three types of budget transfers that can take place, right? You've got unencumbered appropriations within a department budget. Then you've got transfers between departments of unencumbered funds. And then you've got, of course, the transfers from the unappropriated fund balance. So we have essentially three different types of transfers and three different types of procedures that are set up. So in terms of the detail, I'm not sure how much information, how much information you're looking to be provided, but I know that the information in terms of getting the transfers approved is provided to the Board of Finance right now. Is that right, Arosh?
That is correct. I mean, right now, anything that, because now it's very restrictive and we go to the Board of Finance and the council. So that goes on a spreadsheet and there's a running total and everything is shared with the Board of Finance. So this is probably something you want to think about. I mean, you really don't want to see $25, $50 transfers. That's not the point of this. But perhaps if it's interdepartmental, maybe you want to see it. But if it's within the same department, so for example, Parks and Grounds, one year want to move supplies and into another line such as contracted services to adjust a PO, you want to see that it's within the same budget. I mean, I'm come from a different industry. Governing boards never saw this, but I understand this is, public and municipal government is a little bit different. But I think with the Board of Finance, we can establish some dollar amounts, some thresholds that they might feel comfortable, and we can make it a reporting requirement. Keep a running tab of all the transfers.
Or maybe just keep them informed. I think maybe was.
What I was going to suggest as language is the finance director will present a summary of interdepartment transfers to the Board of Finance instead of saying transfer details.
Right.
Works for me.
Okay. The next items in 711, we've got a provision that says the transfer. Right now, these transfers that come from town side unencumbered department appropriations all have to be made the last 3 months of the fiscal year. I don't know what the reason for that is, but Kevin asked that the transfers be made in the last 6 months, so that way you don't have this. It's kind of nonsense, to be honest with you, because then all you end up doing is squirreling them away and doing them in the last 3 months. And again, it's a big administrative burden, and I can't think of a reason for it, because if you're talking about an unencumbered balance, I mean, most towns don't even get into this, right? I mean, I've had this issue in North Haven a lot of times over the years. North Haven has a true town meeting as its legislative body. So this issue about transfers comes up a lot. And you've got a general statute that talks about not expending sums in excess of the appropriation for the department, right? But this charter provision doesn't even say that. It says that you can't even spend between departments unspent money unless you go through this process the last 3 months of the fiscal year. So Kevin wants it to be 6 months. Again, I don't know why it was ever 3 months, but 6 months to me makes a lot more sense.
Just,
Right?
yeah, I'm fine with it, just I've experienced that because of the sports budget at Berlin High. There's times I want to buy things and the athletic director says, no, we gotta hold off, I gotta wait and see if additional expenses come up or something that I may have to cover, so maybe that was the intent. I'm fine with it.
Coach, I have 2 St. Joe's boys in my basement right now.
Oh, boy, 70
Yeah.
something and up, 18 or something, I remember that day.
Yeah, they've been chastised, believe me.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that.
The next provision, still in 711. Right now, the manager can make transfers from one line item to another within a department budget, subject to 3 guidelines. Number 1, he can't hire additional staff that hasn't been properly authorized by the council and the Board of Finance. So let's say a Roche comes in and says, I want to hire Kate, another deputy clerk, and the Board of Finance and the town council say no. A Roche can't transfer money from another department budget to fund the position that the council and the Board of Finance didn't support. The second requirement is that transfers can't be made to purchase major pieces of equipment if those items were deleted by the council or Board of Finance. Again, the town manager doesn't have the authority to override the Board of Finance and the town council by using unspent money. And sometimes that don't have this charter provision, that's exactly what happens. And people think, hey, that's great flexibility. If they underspend their budget, then why shouldn't they be allowed to go and hire those people? And of course, we know that just because you overspend money one year doesn't mean it's going to carry forward to the future. But the last requirement in here is that Roche's authority, limited such as it is limited to $5,000 for any single transfer. And again, that's just in 2022, a very, very small amount of money. And it doesn't make any sense because if he can transfer, we're talking about line items within a department budget. So if you've got a police department budget and they've underspent their, full-time line item, but they've overspent their overtime, and a Roche wants to be able to transfer money from one line item to the other to reconcile and zero out that budget, he should be able to do so. So that's the purpose behind that deletion. Okay. Are we good with that?
Yes.
Okay. The next item is section 7-15, the annual town report. Okay. This is what I was talking about before when I said, we have a requirement to provide the recommendations of the auditor, the financial statements, the notes to the financial statements, and the annual report from the collector of revenue. It's this last piece that staff wants to do away with, which is this all appropriate annual reports by boards, commissions, committees, and elected or appointed officials, which are submitted by a date specified by the manager. It's just not something that has any value. I don't know what all appropriate annual reports by elected or appointed officials even is. I suppose a Roche could ask me to do an annual report.
Yeah, Jeff, if I may, for the group's benefit, this is due by March of the following fiscal year. I think this was good before we had the World Wide Web and internet and all the electronic communication. 9 months later, most of the stuff is obsolete and all current information is available online, and nobody really cares to look at something from 9 months ago. And especially in election years, when you change the members in boards and commissions, they change in January, and then they get an old list, and it's very confusing. And the folks who serve on these boards and commissions, sometimes they leave and they don't want to do the report. I don't think adds any value. And any information that people are looking for, nobody goes and looks at a paper report anymore.
Right. So are we okay with that? Okay. The next item is the Berlin VNA. And this has had a lot of discussion over the last few years. We've been trying, the town manager, since the day he started, has been trying to find a solution that balances the needs of the patients with the fiscal concerns of the town and the taxpayers. And, what Steve Mennick recommended, which I thought was a very good suggestion, was right now, we don't know what the answer is. We can't say, hey, in lieu of Berlin VNA, here's the better way to provide public nursing services. So what Steve had recommended was having a provision that essentially sunsets the existing charter provision once we have an ordinance that provides for a new way of providing these services. So if you look at what he drafted in 817.1, it says now provision of public nursing services. It is the intent of the charter that public nursing service shall be provided by the town as shall be set forth in the Code of Ordinances. And then if you go to page 46, you should have the new text of what Steve drafted, which is new chapter 11. And this provides for, once there's an ordinance detailing how this service is going to be provided, a transition. So until such time as that ordinance is in place, the existing charter provisions remain in full force and effect. The Berlin VNA remains intact. And once we have an ordinance, then that will supersede, by the express terms of this revision, the Berlin VNA. And one of the things that we would have to do in an ordinance is we would have to pay very, very careful attention to the continuation of services. Because every patient, aside from the humanitarian and just human factor of not wanting our residents to have 1 minute of one day where they don't get the care that they've come to expect and that they need, we also don't want them to be stressed, right? We don't want people a lot of these folks are going through difficult times with health issues. We don't want to aggravate it by having some charter revision that leaves them hanging. So this is really the best we could come up with, is to say, until such time as there's an ordinance that replaces the Berlin VNA with an equal or better service provider, then this would remain intact. And like I said, we're going to have to be very careful, because in addition, as I started to say, in addition to everybody wants the best for the residents, right? Everybody's on the same page. In addition to that, when I was first asked about this back in 2017, I think one of the first Board of Finance meetings, I got asked to come to a Board of Finance meeting to explain why the Board of Finance couldn't eliminate the Berlin VNA. And one of the reasons that seemed to resonate with them, aside from the care issue, is liability. Every patient under federal law has rights, and you can't simply take away the care that you've been providing as a public agency without there being ramifications. So any ordinance that's drafted will have to carefully handle the transition of care so that every patient that is existing at the time of the ordinance effective date is properly cared for. And so I think this is the right way to do it. I think that, if we had an answer, if we said, okay, as of January 1, 2023, we're going to XYZ regional VNA, or we're going to ABC hospitals home care. If we had an answer and we could say, yeah, this is going to work. It's not only going to give the patients equal or better care, but we're going to have the financial deficit eliminated or significantly mitigated. But we don't have that answer right now. So I really think the best way to deal with it is the way that it's been proposed here.
I don't disagree with Attorney Denapio on that. I know this is a complex issue that's been batted around a lot. I also have concerns about some of the workers, some of the direct care providers, some of which have been with the town 15 and 20 plus years. I don't know how we can, I don't want to hamstring the efforts to provide the services, but I want to put something in place, try to put something in place. And I don't know if we can for some of the workers, especially the direct care providers.
What I've been hearing for years on council, that the model doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
A number of council people have been involved in this and tried to help. Reimbursement, I don't understand the business, but they're telling me the model just doesn't function. And because the way the charter is set up, we were handcuffed. $5 million a year. I know I don't have the answer right now, but by moving to the ordinance regulated, we will be able to adjust it as we go instead of having the charter.
Right.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that. And I was just trying to like search for a way, because I'm also fearful, as Julie said before, with those two issues. I think the Board of Ed and the nurses are gonna be the highest.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's the workers, like these families have now, whether it's Patty Murphy or anybody, that's their person.
But if we don't adjust it, it's going to implode. So what we have to explain to people, we need to fix it, not eliminate it. This is an effort to
We're
make a
not
functioning
determining
model.
what it is
Yeah.
either. This,
We're not.
the Charter Revision Commission
Correct.
is not determining what it is.
Correct.
It's just moving into an ordinance. The other thing is, what happens with the school run services that will also.
That can be part of
the
the
health
ordinance.
services, that'll be part of the ordinance as well?
Yes.
Okay.
They're all, because in
It'll all fall under
our
the-
current structure, the Berlin VNA takes responsibility for nursing overall, and St. Paul's, quite honestly.
Right.
And if another school was to pop up that fits state guidelines, we'd have to.
Yeah.
But
provide
other locals, that's not good. School nurses follow.
But see,
support of that too.
Right.
if we found it more economical, we could, by ordinance, we could give it to the Board of Ed for the school nurse. I don't know the option, but it would
Right,
give us,
that's.
it would give us a
something.
chance to make choices. This
But it
way
would
we
affect
have-
both the town VNA to the residents as well as the school by
Right.
sunsetting this and creating the ordinance. Okay, I just wanted to be clear.
But we're looking to replace the mechanism, not
No,
eliminate it.
I
And
understand.
we have to
Yeah.
explain to
I
the public
understand.
that we're not out to kill it, we're out to fix it.
It's very much a hot button. as you saw
Killing
in the
itself.
public
It is, exactly.
hearing. No, I know.
We're trying to save it essentially.
I think we are too, or the
And
town
sometimes
could
we
just
make it so
decide,
it works.
or the town could just decide that $1 million a year is worth it to maintain the department. It sounds
Well,
like.
that's a possibility too.
Right.
Yeah, right, like they could. I just worry about some of the long-term workers that have done a great job for the town for all these years. If the ordinance comes out and we say we're gonna be a referral agency, we pat them on the back and say, hey, thanks for all your years, take care. So I would just like to at least voice,
We may downsize it, we may enlarge it, but
yeah,
this way we have options.
I just want to put the strong advocacy in for the workers.
And I appreciate, Attorney Denapio also mentioning, which I've heard over and over again, is our care is about the community and the care we provide. People are better. So what we're looking for is to, have the continuity of care for patients and minimize concerns, worries. I think that's a huge thing with seniors. What can I do? I'm stuck. My finances are tied. I can't get anywhere, go anywhere. And so they have too many worries and they don't need to worry about that as long
But
as.
this word doesn't let us abandon it, it says
We can't.
equal or better.
You know, I think from the very beginning, and this conversation started 5 years ago, I think there was a lot of frustration. I think people were frustrated with me because I told them the charter says that the Berlin VNA shall provide these services. And, there's no flexibility. So I think really the role of the Charter Revision Commission on this one issue is to try to provide some flexibility. It may well be, I don't think anybody claims that the Berlin VNA doesn't do a wonderful job, right? So it may well be that there is no more cost-effective way to provide the service. I think that Arosh can speak better than anybody about the progress that's been made. And it may well be that that progress continues and plateaus, and Arosh may come to the council and say, look, I've explored all the alternatives. This is the status quo is the best one with the changes that we've made. So, you know, it may well be that the Berlin VNA in some form down the road continues to provide the service. I just think that the town needs the flexibility so that they can provide the equivalent service at a lower cost if such an alternative exists.
If I may interject here, this meeting and the meetings before, there's this $1 million number being thrown out. I understand that last year we closed around a little bit over 900,000. So still it's close to $1 million. But we made some changes, combining the directors and the clinical supervisors position and not filling certain other positions. We submitted the budget where the deficit would be 700. We're actually a year ahead. We're going to close this year with less than 700, and I can see a pathway to get it close to $500,000. But I do think there needs to be, if there's some flexibility, we probably want to move the school nurses out to the Board of Ed, because it is another area that the director has to manage, and you're not concentrating on getting patients and building relationships. So there are a lot of things you can do. Do I see a pathway to get to break even right now? I don't. But can we get to $500,000? I think so. And the most recent hire from Aaliyah Anderson from Hartford Healthcare, she's fantastic. She's got experience from Hartford Home Healthcare. She worked for a Board of Ed. She worked for a VNA, really good with people, very, very smart, understands the marketplace. So I think we can make some progress, but if you have that flexibility, I don't think we're going to be anywhere near $1 million, but maybe $500,000, and then see where we can go from there.
It's good to know. Thank you for the information.
One thing I would suggest you think about with regard to your overall endeavor is the questions. You know, I mean, there seems to be a lot of concern about grouping questions together and killing stuff that is non-controversial or, easy operational edits with stuff that is. So one thing to start thinking about is how you want to break these up, and I think probably the Berlin VNA ought to be a separate question, so that if people do get confused or people do get concerned, that item doesn't, torpedo things like the $25,000 bid limit. So, that's something you ought to start thinking about. You can group this stuff together into probably, I would say, 4 questions. But you guys know what's out there. You talk to the residents about what they're concerned about. So you're in a much better position than Steve or I are. But I mean, I have basic ideas, for example, all the financial questions probably ought to get grouped into one question. I don't see a benefit to breaking the financial questions out into separate questions. The VNA question probably should be a separate question. The question of the town manager no longer being a resident, maybe you want that as a separate question if you think people feel strongly that the town manager should be a resident. If you decide to go forward with the change on the BOE, that should be a separate question. Those are just my thoughts, but what I'm trying to do is encourage you to think about it, in terms of how you'd want to group the questions.
Is there a way to work the question on the Board of Ed without calling it a partisan Board of Ed?
Well, you don't call it a partisan. That's a Berlin term. That's a Berlin term that goes back as long as I can remember. Yeah, I mean, you either have a Board of Education that is nominated and elected pursuant to Connecticut general statutes, or you have, non-party Board of Ed, which means that instead of being nominated by the town committees, you go through a petition process. So I don't know where the word I mean, I gotta tell you, probably 99% of the votes in my 6 years on the Trumbull Board of Ed were unanimous. My wife was on before we moved from North Haven to Trumbull in 2010. My wife was on the North Haven Board of Ed for 9 years. And, very, very few of their votes were partisan. I'm not sure about Berlin, but I think that, we're not going to call it, switching from a nonpartisan to a partisan. I think that's a misnomer.
We do let the parties nominate people. That will not eliminate the petition process, right?
Sure. Sure. It's a right.
Where are we at? Let me-
That's all I have.
I think that's it, unless there was things that we wanted to circle back to.
I don't know, knowing that we were trying to keep some time on this, so we can have about 10 minutes. There was some language, Attorney Denafrio, that I just wanted to ask about. On
Sure.
page 16, section 443, Board of Finance vacancies. Would that vacancy be filled with the same political party? Doesn't indicate that in that particular section.
Yes.
Should that be clarified in there, even though I'm recommending we take a look at the Board of Finance? But
It is in there. It says, shall fill such vacancy for the unexpired portion of the term as provided in section 2-13 of the charter. 2-13 says, in filling any vacancy, the council shall appoint a person of the same political party.
okay. The other thing is on page 17, section 5-2, removal. I'm sorry, Arosh, we don't want you removed, but should there be in the first sentence, the manager may be removed by a majority vote of the entire membership of the council as herein provided for just cause?
Oof. I mean, that's a tough one because, I'd like to say that, the town manager as a public employee really is gonna, get a louder mill and like any other public employee would. But, tying the council's hands by saying it has to be for just cause, Arosh, I think your contract says that anyway. So did we lose Arosh? Arosh has a contract. Town manager has a contract. And there's different bases for termination, but they're all pretty much just cause.
Well, we went through it previous, and there was a lot of question on the part of nearly everyone in the town in regards to why the town manager was released from her position.
Well, she was not terminated though.
No, I understand that, but there was a lot of underground kind of thing, and I just, I know that for employment purposes, we're an at-will state anyways,
Well, yeah, I mean, except the Roche does have a contract.
Right.
And I wouldn't want to have a charter provision that's at odds with his contract.
Okay.
I mean, we negotiated it, it's pretty standard.
Okay. The other thing, again, just a language thing on section 5.3, it says Department of Education. Should it say Board of Education? I've never heard anything referenced as Department of Education.
The thing that the word department comes from this statute that I mentioned before, 7-348. But I agree with you. I mean, I've never, other than that one place, I've never seen it in a charter before.
Yeah.
There's the way that Connecticut works, we use these terms for 100 years. There's basically two departments. There's town government and there's Board of Ed.
Okay. And I think that was it, other than the two, kind of bigger issues, which is voting only for a mayor and the Board of Finance, but we're not gonna have any time to bring that up tonight.
So do you want me to generate the revised draft tomorrow and circulate it so you have it to look at over the weekend? And
I would appreciate that. Yeah, I think that
Sure.
would be helpful.
you got it.
Thank you.
So on
Did I hear-
Monday, there will be, on Monday with that agenda for Monday, there's going to be, I'll put language on there saying that you're going to move the draft report and send it to public hearing. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
Just,
Does that require separation of questions at that point?
no,
The only other thing is we got this, it looks like an email from Joan and Kristen signed jointly about the election thing. I don't know if you can fill us in.
The thought there is, we talked about it quickly, is that they would like the option to only have one polling space open instead of at this point all three.
We sort of did talk about it in one of the meetings.
Yeah, you do.
They never landed it.
Right.
anywhere.
Have the discretion.
Because now they're down to 3 currently.
Right.
We were 5, we're down to 3 for that referendum because the turnout was typically so low.
Right.
I think I was like 63 when I went into Brazil.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
And our voters use the voting places in school too.
Yeah, and
So
that's-
that
that
was-
was-
Safety issue, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it would coincide with school and service days.
Which ones are that? Any? All mine.
Yeah, well, I think the only one currently that isn't is the VFW, right?
Well, it's the VFW and the senior center under the
Oh,
old, all right?
Under the
And
new.
the new is the three schools.
Right.
so,
So they have been working, and of course Julie brought this up. They've been working, the registrars have been working with the Department of Education to try to, Department of Education, to try to change these dates. And it's just not going anyplace. But, you know, that's Department of Education, it's not us. I don't know if the charter.
Well,
committee-
the Board of Ed develops their calendar 2 years in advance.
They've been doing this
So-
for many years,
Yeah,
trying
so,
to get this.
so I would think it would behoove, the Board of Ed, in light of school safety, to consider a professional development day rather than having all these folks walking into the schools to cast ballots.
it did seem weird. As I said, weird.
Yeah.
It's actually public. I was walking in as the kids were.
Yeah, I didn't feel comfortable either, Joe, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm safe,
I
but
was
I just.
surprised.
And then, part of me says there should be a discretion for a referendum to just use one polling place. I'm not talking about the general election, I'm talking about,
Referendum.
Yeah.
Here was my question, and maybe an attorney can answer this for me too, is, I think do we have some guidelines from the state about how many polling places? Is that all determined within our Berlin town?
For the referendum.
For the
It is
referendum.
determined by the town.
So
Yeah,
then that would
right.
not be a problem legally just to only have one location open.
yeah, some towns do it. You know,
I know
North Haven has one polling place for their budget referendum in the middle of the town, so.
So not a problem, and that's all I was concerned and not knowing about, so, yeah, I think that would be.
At their discretion.
You'll
I mean,
get, you'll
yeah.
get some people that browse, so I didn't vote on the budget, I showed up my place, nobody, the food,
well, it's just like adjusting to the 3 polling places as opposed to the 5, right?
right?
Think about it. People are growling about that
11
too.
after redistricting, we had people all over the place, it was a nightmare for everybody.
People growl about everything,
So is that,
but they just can't find them. I did talk to Christie.
is there a place in the charter then that has that?
Would you like to see it?
Yeah, at the discretion of the registrars.
Can we somehow phrase it in at discretion of the registrars?
I did talk to Christie. They're having a difficult time getting things to work too.
Yeah, that's the big word.
Yeah. she probably said it's terrible. They can't find- So,
Considered most, nobody's seen it, left out the wall.
no, exactly. It's a very.
So you want to add language that gives the registrars, would they both have to agree?
I would say yes.
So add language in the section on budget referenda, giving the registrars upon unanimous consent.
What's a disagreement? Problems does that bring?
What if they
Sorry.
don't agree?
What if they don't agree?
So if they don't agree, it stays status quo.
Status quo.
The towns, they agree on it. It's fun if they agree.
Can't throw in a tiebreaker, arbitrator, something like that.
God, no.
I think they'll most.
Yeah,
go to the
yeah.
town clerk.
That's what I like.
I was gonna say it's a natural.
Getting the volunteers doing the training and everything else is a hassle for them.
Yeah, it is. It's a good point.
I can't imagine that I would ever.
Even in the future, I can't imagine.
So with their discretion, that includes their location, they could choose their location as well.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. I think that's good.
and they're both cautious.
Yeah.
They're gonna check, they're gonna check in with the town
Well,
council.
again, you want to allow, knowing that, maybe there will be registrars in the future, so hopefully the future registrars will also come to
I
some.
think how it used to be, right? We all used to traipse into the McGee school, check
Yeah.
in, and that's where we all
Yeah,
voted. We
yeah,
had to
yeah.
show up to the hearing to even vote.
Yeah.
Or Berlin High.
Yeah.
Depending on the renovations.
All right, so your special will be on Monday to discuss whatever, and then to send it to public hearing. Public hearing will be done on Tuesday. As soon as I get the edits from, and the final draft from Attorney D'Onofrio, I'll post it on the website. I don't know how to get out on Facebook because of the length of it. But we'll get it out as much as we can, and we'll have copies available for public hearing. Public hearing notice will be advertised 5 days prior to the hearing, not including the day of the hearing. For the hearing, it will be in a paper, and I'm paying for that ad.
See, I know other towns utilize this. I don't know that Mayor Mark has. And I'm thinking of West Hartford. She's constantly sending those pre-recorded things out to people, letting them know things that are going on in the town.
We have looked at that,
Yeah.
and right now we're with Everbridge, and it's not something, it's really something that's supposed to be used for emergency purposes or for something.
So Roche has been working on a system where
Yeah.
you register your number and you'll get notified.
Yeah.
So, but we're not in line
Just
for that
Roche,
yet.
you still on?
No,
No,
it's
no, it's
not.
not.
It's incredibly annoying now because my girlfriend doesn't live there. But she's constantly still getting them. And I just always thought, how cool is that? Like when on hot days, they say what the cooling centers are. During COVID, they were talking about distributing masks and everything. Other was just like good information. to have.
Yes, he is.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
we can see if we can do it, because what they did was, it was Civic Plus. And what they did was they actually took all of our contacts that we already have and moved it. Now, whether it's up and running,
Yeah.
but we could do a test.
Did
of
you have
it.
a database that you exported into?
That's
Because
what
I'm a
we
little
did.
familiar because we.
Yeah, that's what we did.
That's it.
So we're getting there. It's just kind of on it. But I can check with the roads tomorrow.
Just, I don't want residents. to-
Because it is such a tight
Just a nice thing.
timeframe,
Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
it
And I-
really is.
other than the Board of Ed's question, the DNA, I mean, when people know there's a charter with the GPA, but they're all busy, they all have busy lives. It's just a little flag of, hey, this.
Well, last time I think it was 6 weeks.
Yeah.
The commission met 6 or 7 weeks.
And back then, we actually had a newspaper that would report. things
Yes,
that the town was doing.
That's another problem.
It's a major problem. The Britain Herald's terrible. There's nothing near the.
Citizens even worse. They don't cover anything.
Formulated document. We're gonna handle it.
So it will be the draft report similar to what my understanding is, would be very similar to the red line that you have. All right, and then you would meet on the 15th to talk about whatever came out of the public hearing, and then it will go to the council for the 21st. So on the 15th, which is Wednesday, I need that document per se on Thursday, because everything's milled out on, or not milled out, but everything's prepared for Friday to go And
Oh, it's
that's
council.
under, yeah, that's under charter for it to all be distributed on Friday. So that's where there's gonna be a very quick turnaround.
So we need our questions on the 15th.
No, you don't need your questions until after
Who formulates the questions?
you do. And then.
And they have to accept them? Okay, well, they-
So the. And I think he's checking some.
And just checking with you, Mr. Chair, do you prefer? There's probably a couple things I'm gonna ask for. Did you want it in writing or just the subject matter before to prepare? I mean, it's probably gonna be the Board of Finance. I'm guessing Julie and I may leave the council alone, but if we come up with something, we will send it out to you guys before. But I mean, it will.
I have no requirements.
Okay.
I want any information.
Okay.
The more clear you can make it for us. the better.
Yeah, it looks like you came prepared a little bit with some.
Yeah, we'll try to do that.
I got comments from other people. I tried to put it together.
Okay, all right.
All right, I just want to be fair there.
So you send it to Kate, maybe, and then.
And send it to Katie and-
I send it
And then
out.
Kate.
We didn't get it, and then she brought it to
So
us.
She emailed it about, I think my email said 2:43.
Oh, I wasn't home, that's why I didn't see it, okay.
So the open forum on Tuesday, yeah, it's set for an hour and a half.
Okay.
There's no set on it. You can go until midnight if you want.
Right.
There's nothing set.
100 people show up.
Yeah,
100
I didn't know if there was a time.
Do we limit the time that they can talk?
It's up to the chair, to you.
Everybody was pretty respectful last week, but I don't know now, it's more issues
How's it
coming up.
2 minutes from?
We did, I think we did 3 at the Capitol. Is Donna still on? I think we did 3.
All I know is they were around the clock.
No.
At times.
I
feel bad for
I will suggest it for the public.
Yeah.
To keep it brief and.
Okay. That's fair.
I know if the audience is listening to council with the people, then you keep the same thing over and over again, 15 minutes.
Well, you guys can think about it over the weekend too. And 3 minutes or what, maybe just say in the beginning that we reserve the right to cut you off if you drag on too long.
The one thing I won't allow, 15 to 3 minutes. I want to hear what they have to say. And then go.
Let's get there. We have a question, we have a question.
I wrote
Trying
down
to be
everything.
debating. I'm all
Everybody
set.
said.
Yeah. All right. That's a good one.
Anything I want to do adjourn?
Second.
Oh, it's I was gonna say, we have to have a motion first.
I said something really quickly.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your help.
I,
Thanks, folks.
Good night.
Thank you, Counselor.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.